Anthony Darby.
Chuck Hen.
We are live with Nurse Laura. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Thank you so much for coming back. Is this your third or second time?
Second
Time. Always appreciate you coming on. If anyone is somehow still unfamiliar with Nurse Laura, she serves as a clinical director for couple dispensaries, likely several more with some pending legislation enforcing that clinical director role. And for us, Nurse Laura serves as a liaison to physicians and practitioners on the Western Shore that are looking to resell our CBD products. rnforwellness.com, right?
Yes.
Anywhere else to find you?
On Instagram, RN for Wellness. Facebook, RN for Wellness. Yeah, doing a couple events with Hopkins coming up soon.
That's really exciting. And you do some, and for folks listening on the other side of the bridge, like you do some events in Sykesville every now and then for patients, right? Like we have a little bit of following in the old Carroll County region.
Yeah, we do.
Yes, I do events with a couple of different physicians to help patients sign up to get their medical cannabis card. I'll do the front end part for them, give them a mini like Cannabis 101, and then the doctor will see them to see if they can get a certification.
So if anybody's listening around, that's a big thing because a lot of times it's hard to navigate how to sign up and do these type of things. So if you have somebody like Nurse Laura to guide you around who has a relationship with some practitioners, it's an easier process.
Yeah, and it's so crazy how something as simple as submitting the document to prove your address or having your picture can hold you up for 6 months.
This guy got his picture rejected my first time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's when you go in our dispensary now and you go into what used to be Dr. Hoffman's office, you'll see white pieces of paper hanging on the wall because we take the pictures there. Yeah, we're standard in that.
It's so simple and it's so challenging. The file size, hard to upload. And if you make one mistake, you just go into a bucket of no man's land.
Exactly.
It takes them a while to get back. So if there is an issue, one thing that the patients that have worked with me would know is that I'll follow up with the commission because I can email them and we'll get the patient taken care of.
We're doing a lot of that now. So we started off having like an open enrollment Tuesday where you could come in and we would help you sign up. Now we're doing it 5 days a week by appointment. So you can just make an appointment online or through Facebook. You come in, we'll help you take your picture, get you registered with the state, submit your documentation, and really get the ball rolling. What I'm really excited about is in the new place, we'll be able to do all of that and begin the kind of the CBD consultation, which is a good lead into kind of what the premise of the show is today, or the podcast today is. And that really is kind of a revisiting of CBD. It's really interesting, like everything happens so fast in terms of our industry. Mm-hmm. And when we first started Peninsula Holistics a little over 2 years ago, it started out as people coming to our dispensary who didn't want to get their card, right? And typically this because they are concerned about their job, they're concerned about maybe custody, spouse, or handgun rights. Typically on the Eastern Shore, that's a big one, right? It's a huge thing for our hunting folks. But they wanted CBD and they didn't want to go to the gas station and get crap. But there wasn't anything that they found to be local. When I say local, 2 years ago, we're just talking domestic.
Mm-hmm. And not grown in China with a bunch of agricultural principles that we wouldn't want.
Exactly. CW Hemp at this point is, their website is showing out of stock, out of orders. So that's where we were sending folks in the beginning. Haley's Hope. Some of these larger national brands that 2 years ago, they just didn't have the supply chain to be able to meet kind of a national demand. And we felt we had the relationships with the processor in Cambridge and the wherewithal to know what patients needed. So we busted our ass and came out with a product. Since then,
a great product.
There's a great product. Since then, you've seen hundreds of brands, in the Eastern Seaboard. If you look at it that way, if you look at Maryland, maybe, well over, I can think of 10 or 15 local Maryland brands right now that are to market.
Are like a larger, larger brands. There's a million of them.
Yeah, not the mom and pop Karens in the world that just, made up their own.
We don't know where they're being made, where they're getting the hemp.
No. But
if it's getting tested.
Folks like Baywater Hemp and Woodland Pharmalistics, these local farmers that are bringing products to market that are grown, locally. So we've seen, the point that I'm trying to make is in just a very short period of time, we've seen the product demand being met in terms of if you were looking for a high quality product, it's much easier in 2020 than it was in 2018. Yeah. Fair enough?
It's true. Well, and the change of the laws, I think, helped that
Correct.
a lot to be able to have a full spectrum product shipped over state lines.
We saw the Farm Bill really change everything. So in Maryland, they were slightly ahead of the national scale in terms they had their own research bill in place, and they were going to grow hemp last summer no matter what. But with that Farm Bill being passed, it really opened up the doors for everyone. Now you're seeing almost every state come on. We talked to some folks that went to a large conference in Texas, and like he made it seem like exactly what you would expect. 10-gallon hatch. I'm here to grow 10 acres of hemp, and I'm going to grow more hemp than anybody else. And it's a weird dynamic. So, like, if for the kind of the insiders looking in, the hemp industry still has not, in my opinion, reached a stable standpoint where there's still lots of ambiguity with the FDA. What the picture that was shared to me was this very interesting dynamic where in Texas, for the first time, hemp is going to be grown, and you have these very eager entrepreneurs they're going to grow thousands of acres, and they're going to do this, and then you have other folks that are in more developed states, maybe 2 or 3 year old programs, and they've seen the failure rates, they've seen the biomass that's just sitting in storage.
They don't have anyone to sell it to.
Yeah, they know that the market is not as advantageous as maybe it's being made out to be. So I think like every emerging market, we see winners and losers. We're seeing those folks that are gaining market share, that are finding stability within the market and are gaining some traction. And we're seeing some folks that are likely to fail. I mean, some of the largest farms in Maryland had the least successful outcomes, and some of the
whether that's the plants just weren't a good harvest, or that the quality of the lab results of how much CBD was actually in their harvest, right? Because I mean, I think that's a big thing, is you can have a successful harvest, but if it's not testing at a ratio.
And what we found is because last year's growing conditions were as good as they may ever be, so a lot of the tests came back fairly great. But there was so much of it that even with good results, there just wasn't a market, that no one really got these windfall profits from even the stuff that tested high. And this stuff may change by next growing season, but right now the USDA is adamant that they're not testing for Delta-9, but they're testing for total THC in 2020. And what the farmers are telling us means a 6-week shorter cycle for them. And that means that right now, their aspirations were to grow between 12 and 15% CBD. The realistic aspirations for 2020 will be between 5 and 7.
Oh, wow.
So they don't test hot.
So that's interesting. And this is confusing for patients, I think, because as I'm listening to you, right, and I'm informed, I'm thinking about how, okay, all this CBD, well, I'm a medical patient, I want to get CBD. And maybe patients don't realize that are listening that the dispensaries can't sell inside the dispensary to the medical patients. They can't sell a hemp-derived CBD product. So anything that's sold in the dispensary is coming from a different crop and a different grow, a different plant. Yeah. So that's an important difference.
Like twins, I think is one way of describing kind of the hemp and cannabis dynamic, where they're kind of like twins, but one's higher in CBD, low in THC, and one's gonna be higher in THC, lower in CBD. But you find these hybrid plants, and the designation is so acute at 0.3% that something that tests at 1% THC, although it's marijuana, it's not getting you high. It's not going to have the same effects. It's going to act much more like that cannabis sativa hemp plant.
Right, but officially it would be illegal for someone to sell it.
And our patients know that because right now we're selling in a little booth in our waiting room, because that's the only public area that we have in our dispensary that we're able to sell our own product. And for months and months and months, we had no avenue to sell our own product that we created in our dispensary, which created just a world of problems. But getting back to the point at hand is because there was a lack 2 years ago when we opened our door, and as you just pointed out, there was lots of regulatory issues that have prevented us from going and sourcing CBD products from elsewhere. I think the reality of what happened is in 2018, when we opened our doors and we started seeing the largest influx of patients, there were product shortages that were well documented, but looking in retrospect, the largest product shortage was the CBD products.
Right, and the CBD products were the most expensive products. Yeah.
They
were more expensive than a high THC distillate vape or something.
Yeah, I mean, the Mary's Remedy was like the first CBD product that I think that we had.
Like $150 plus for a bottle. And that scared people away.
It scared people away. CBD doesn't have the hit you in the face effects like marijuana does. It's way more subtle as most therapeutic products are. So it does take a lot more, I think, discipline in terms of using it for the patient. So, this lack of products and the lack of education, we're not experts at this point. We're 2018. We hadn't seen thousands of patients at this point. We'd only seen a few. But what we look at now realizes, in hindsight, I would say that we have overutilized THC products and very much underutilized CBD products. And is that fair to say? Do you think
generally in the medical market, I do think that's true. I think that patients just don't have enough education on the value of CBD in addition to their THC. There are some patients that are just using CBD products, but the patients that are using THC or started using higher THC products without the knowledge, without someone telling them and sharing with them the information that adding some CBD could actually help your THC work better. You could get more bang for your buck.
Yeah.
If no one tells them that, and there isn't a significant feeling associated with it.
Yeah, there's real body chemistry going on here. We have an endocannabinoid system, right? Like, these are different cannabinoids that you're introducing to your body, and you can't expect that just taking THC products are going to give you all the balancing of an endocannabinoid system. And if you're flooding it with super high THC products and all you're doing is dabbing every day and you're not taking any THC, and you tell me and you come to us with problems of anxiety, like for us, unfortunately, guess what the cannabis guys are going to say? Stop the dabbing.
Right. Take a break.
Take a break.
Reset.
Let's go through a tolerance break. Let's reset your system with some CBD.
And start some CBD.
And then, if dabbing is helpful, which it is for some patients for different things, then that's fine. But the biggest thing that I'm seeing right now is the lack of a sense of balancing and a lack of sense of leading with CBD products, which, from the patient data that we have, and when I look at our successful cases and I look at our cases that are unsuccessful, the largest common denominator that I see is a strong CBD regimen. And you seem to echo that sentiment, right?
I do. So Maryland Health and Wellness in Hagerstown, I'm there every Monday and third Wednesday of the month. And it's funny because I sit not in a closed office. I sit in an open space in the dispensary with patients. They're all already cannabis patients. Some of them have already been shopping and been to other dispensaries or this dispensary before meeting with me. And we talk about definitely always, like if they're just starting with CBD. But the funny thing is that some of the patients that are like the dabbers, the people that have been shopping and been doing this for a while, and were doing it before it was on the medical market, they hear me talking and they come over and they're like, "Nurse Laura, can I meet with you?" And I'm like, "Sure, like let's talk. What are you treating? What benefit are you finding? What are you looking for?" And quite a few of them now, I've said, "Have you ever tried CBD? You might consider adding CBD." And now they're saving money because they're using less THC.
Yeah.
So they're needing less THC to get the same benefit and actually getting more relief overall with a balance of less anxiety, better sleep overall because they're using a combination. So it's really funny because these are not the patients that the dispensary or myself might have expected to want to meet with Nurse Laura for a consultation, and yet it really is. We're seeing a benefit for those patients as well. Everyone is a patient.
Well, I was going to say, have you seen any shift so when people come into the dispensary now and they have in their mind they want to meet with Nurse Laura, has there been a shift in people's mindset towards maybe I'll start with CBD yet and then go into THC, or are they still kind of naive to both?
Well, so it's interesting. So when they're a new patient and they come to the dispensary to meet with me, I usually talk to them about this is where we start. Like, and I have to give everybody the disclaimer, which I'll give to you real quick. I'm not a doctor. I'm a nurse. Marijuana is still federally illegal. All of these things. What I'm giving you isn't medical advice.
Yep.
And it's not a prescription. And you can do 100% opposite of what I suggest. However, here's based on my experience and my time in the industry, what I think. Sign this form.
Yeah.
Don't sue me. Don't sue me. Don't sue them.
Standard operating procedures
right.
in a federally illegal environment.
Yeah, I have to do all that. People are like, okay, I get it. Can you talk?
I can talk now.
Right, now I can. Sign this. But with that, I suggest everyone to at least start with a CBD or a CBD, maybe 2 to 1 with just a tiny bit of THC, because especially if they don't have any experience with THC, for most people, I have not met very many people that do not either have anxiety or inflammation.
Yeah.
Many people have either
and some are
anxiety
going to
or
argue
inflammation.
that they're connected, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So there are very few people that CBD would be contraindicated for. I've had a couple of people. So, there are a couple of drugs, and you guys have Mary Pat. So you're very familiar with the drug interactions, knowing that you have a pharmacist.
Anything that interacts with the phytoform Phe57 enzyme, right?
Listen to
What's
you.
the real one? How do you really say that?
Yeah, I don't say it.
Nice.
So what's a version I can understand on that,
Yeah.
Nurse Laura?
Mary Pat.
Well, so it's really easy
Grapefruit, right?
to look up grapefruit. Like any drug that's the easiest thing to know. Any drug that has a warning on it that says, like, don't eat grapefruit when you take this drug. It's that same receptor, that same area of your body that could put you at some risk. Generally,
there
from
are
my
some
understanding,
antidepressants that fall into that category.
Yeah.
I know if we have some patients that we do have to say, you need a strategy here of weaning off this before you implement CBD. It's not very often, but we've had it.
And generally, like even with any research articles that come, sometimes I'll see something posted on some social media and it sounds absurd. It's usually that it's in such high doses, the doses that we're not normally recommending for people to take, even of CBD. People always think more is better. It's the American culture. More is better. More is better.
It's a biphasic effect. Not enough. You don't
So-
get the desired result. Too much, you're not going to get the desired result either.
So
It's
low
a
and
sweet
slow.
spot.
Keep going until you find the sweet spot. If you take one more step and you realize, no different benefit, come back down to the sweet spot and try to stay there. So generally, even with the patients where it could be contraindicated, we're still at a very low risk for it actually being a contraindication because they're not taking that high dose. They're not taking the amount of CBD that would be pushing into lab rats to do some research study. So it still is risky, but I have had patients who are bleeders to begin with or on medications that might make them bleed that have noticed more bleeding increasing. And so we just cut back.
I didn't realize
we
CBD is a
changed
blood
the
thinner.
spacing. Anti-inflammatory, it is a little bit of a blood thinner, again, in high doses.
Sure.
And again, depending on other medications you're on, depending on your body already. And then a new thing that I've been dealing with recently is I'm surprised at how many people have a sensitivity to MCT oil, coconut oil, so the carrier. So patients may immediately think it's the CBD. The CBD is the problem. But then we try just plain
MCT.
oil and find that it's actually, for whatever reason, they're sensitive.
So and I know MCT because I take MCT oil like in the morning, and I got it through some podcasts, and I like to try these little things, right? But I put it in my coffee, and at first it's one of those things you got to be really careful with because if you overload it with MCT oil, like
You just go to the
you
bathroom
just
a
go
lot.
to the bathroom
Yes.
like a ton.
A diuretic.
And and
Not a diuretic. It makes you like have diarrhea.
Yeah, it's like
Diarrhea.
Yeah, so like if you take too much MCT oil, like it'll you just gotta
And
really
it
be
could,
careful
like for
with
some
it.
patients, it even could make them feel a little nauseated.
Yeah.
Which is ironic because we're talking about CBD and THC
Which should
for
have
nausea,
Nausea.
antiemetic type of thing. So it's just something that having the support of a medical professional of sorts or a well-educated dispensary staff or just someone one-on-one
Like an
consultation.
interdisciplinary approach to cannabinoid-based wellness almost?
Integrative medicine. Yes. Yes. What do you know about that?
Well, I'm betting on my entire financial livelihood on
We're betting a lot on we know a little bit about
that
it.
being the case. And quite frankly, it's we live the brand, right? And we've gone through a lot of challenges through growing this business, and quite frankly, they have personal effects on you, right? And if you ever don't look like you're super peppy or you don't feel like $1 million, typically the thing that you'll get is, why are you sad? You own a dispensary. Like, you have all the weed in the world, right?
Right.
And that's like kind of like the
You're on the
sentiment.
green
Like, I get the flu,
plan.
and I'd be like, oh, how'd you get the flu? Like, I thought you owned a weed shop. Like, it's like,
You walk around in a bubble all day, nothing affects you.
I very quickly personally realized that there are lots of limits to utilizing THC products for benefits with mental health and physical health. There are certainly side effects. There are repercussions from using too much, too little, vice versa. But with the new wellness campus, it's like and you almost get bundled into this position where you need to defend the therapeutic value of THC because it's always under scrutiny and attack,
stigma.
right?
Yes.
If anyone remembers when typically they're first talking about like a legalization bill, they say, why don't they just legalize the CBD? That's the only therapeutic thing they need. Like, they don't need the THC.
THC is the gateway drug.
Yeah,
THC
and like you look at
causes
programs like Virginia
addiction.
where they're capping THC at super low percentages. They don't realize THCA is going to be in their concentrates at 98%. But I digress. So in the beginning, I felt like I needed to make sure that I was on this THC protection bandwagon because it certainly is therapeutic. I think there's a lot of benefits to folks that need it, and you want to defend it. And but now I need to be able to defend all the cannabinoids, and I feel much more comfortable being able to defend a wellness model, saying that like CBD is amazing, and most people struggle with inflammation, and that inflammation causes so many other trickle down effects and side effects that you're not cognizant of. But now we have a wellness campus, and I know that's the model. Like, just a dispensary, just walking into a dispensary and getting cannabis or just getting CBD is not going to fix all your life woes. And we always knew that. We never tried to sell that concept, but I think that's somehow what the public was expecting is like, I've been unhealthy for 30 years. I'm going to walk in and get this new miracle drug, and it's going to make all my aches and pains go away, and my sedative lifestyle is going to continue to be awesome.
Right.
It's like,
It's funny that you say that because that's one of the things that I found the more patients that I've been meeting with recently, well, not recently, over the past couple of years, is that patients come in, they finally got their card, took them a while to get it. They sit down and they're like, okay, this is the miracle drug. You're going to cure me. Nothing else worked. And I find myself now that I have the opportunity to have repeat customers, and I meet with them routinely, to tell them on the first visit, this is not a miracle drug. This may not work for you. It may take us 4 months to find the right combination of medication in your little toolbox, right? Because it's not about just one thing 4 times a day is going to fix you. And so we really need to work on it, and you really need to be your own advocate, and you need to do the work, and you need to still get your sleep and eat healthy and do all the other parts of your wellness that are going to make a difference. And they're like, oh.
I know.
Like, I just want the green pill.
Yes. And that's unfortunate, but that's the reality. And I think for a while I was almost scared to have some of those conversations, those very real conversations of expectation setting, of saying, look, like, this is going to be lifestyle modification. No one wants to hear that.
They don't.
But I do believe that there's almost like a little bit of a carrot with cannabis. It's like, well, if I do these lifestyle modifications, like, there's a little bit, at least I feel better. There's a little bit of reward. And I do think that's where we have the most success. And like, we talked about earlier off camera about, the patient that was referred to us from University of Maryland, a hospice patient, addiction issues, and lots of inflammation issues from a post-surgery. And the 2 dispensaries they went to before us, before they actually sat down, all they did was throw THC at him, right? And that THC was raising his anxiety. It wasn't helping him out with his pain because all he was focusing on, because his mind was racing, was his pain. It was like this. It was like the exact opposite of a therapeutic approach to this, and it was very eye-opening for me again when we had him in there, of why this wellness campus is so important and why it's so important to lead with CBD. His wife was uncomfortable with the cannabis regimen because he was showing seeking behavior, because he was getting these very intoxicating products, right? But then saying that they weren't working, so you needed more of them. It was just a
Right.
very
So
complex.
even though it's not physically addictive, officially physically addictive,
Right.
it still emotionally and habitually can can be addictive.
Just
if
like anything
it's
that gets you
helping you feel better,
intoxicated. Yeah.
like coffee.
Or
well, no, I
food,
guess coffee
sugar.
is actually physically
Anything.
addictive.
I guess, yeah.
I'm addicted to coffee.
We've had that
Where's my
conversation. Where's my coffee? Cut. No, and like once again, like I'm not scared to say these things. Like there's negative consequences from overdoing on THC, and like if your dispensary is not able to share that information with you, or they're holding that back, then they're not being honest with you, and you're not in a treatment program that's fully transparent.
They're not there to really make you better, which is why you're there in the first place.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Good.
okay. So I have another patient example that is you're making me think of, which is a patient that was having significant anxiety, but she had previously been using THC. And so THC, she was like, no, THC helps me because it helps with my depression. And I kept explaining, and if you add some CBD, it's going to help with the anxiety. It's going to be a better balance. But the most important thing is consistency. And that's one of the things, too, that I don't know that we get to express enough from the bud tender, patient care assistant in a dispensary behind the counter to the end user, the patient, which is if you're trying to get off of some medications or you're trying to treat some symptom you have and use this as a medication, you have to be consistent. It can't just be as needed all the time. So with CBD, for example, you were sharing earlier, you don't have an immediate feeling reaction. You can't necessarily at first tell that you have it on board or not. Over time, as it builds up in your system, your body starts to respond, and you do notice. Like I've noticed if I forget to take it,
Yeah,
That's
right, I
true.
notice
That's
what's
the same boat
missing,
I'm in.
right? So for patients that are trying to use THC or THC and CBD for depression, and they go off of those other medications, which were in their system, and they were taking them 24/7 for years, and then they don't have enough cash one day, and they don't buy their medicine, and they don't take THC or CBD for a couple of days, they can plummet
Yes.
into despair with their serotonin, and it really can be a problem. And it's for that reason that there are some psychiatrists and psychologists out there that are like, no THC for depression. I think it's that research. That's the reason why. And really, it's just about the patient has to understand that you're still using this as medicine, and you have to take it routinely, like medicine, where a product that's a balance of CBD and THC, a tincture, maybe not smoking it routinely, taking it as medicine is what's going to keep them stable.
Yeah, the CBD regimen of stability, I think that's so. I always make the joke that no one needs to remind me to take my THC every day, but I had to really focus. And one of my goals for 2020 was to really get regimented in my CBD use. And the consistency of my CBD use has absolutely, the outcome is much more consistency in my mood. So I have depression and anxiety, and sometimes you don't know what's what. And sometimes treating the depression doesn't always help the anxiety, right? So sometimes a dab in the morning when you're not feeling so hot gives you that energy, but then that energy actually manifests maybe an hour into anxiousness depending on your environment. So you weren't feeling so hot, you took a dab to feel better, and I'm just speaking for myself. And then you go into an environment and like it's a shit show and you're like, fuck, like, you know, you're up and you have to try to manifest that. What I realized with the CBD use is that I don't find that I have those up and downs, nor do I find the immediate need for those like to medicate
Like I
with
need a
THC
hit.
as much
Right.
in the morning. And I was a little bit of a tangent here, but I think there's some point to this, and especially
The
with folks that are
consistency
looking
of
at you know,
using your
we're
medicine.
rolling out some programs at the wellness campus specifically with CBD. So we have a Be Well, a Feel Well, and a Sleep Well. The Be Well is around the mental health thing, and one of the biggest components of that is a very consistent 4 times a day dosage, because and a dosing journal that accompanies that, and really putting the responsibility and onus on these folks to be able to track in that dosing journal that you're taking this consistently, because I think THC is great for anxiety and depression. Although CBD doesn't have the intoxicating effects, it's psychoactive. It does change your mood. It can give you that level of stability. And I honestly feel that both in tandem are what works best for me. But I think because the intoxication of the THC when you are feeling low, when you are feeling down, is beneficial and is is kind of what you're seeking sometimes. That it's easy to lay off the CBD, which is really going to get you over that hump and through the next day to give you that stability. So the biggest issue with THC I find is the up and down, especially when you're doing things like a dab or you're taking these quick high doses that
in inhaled form,
pen.
a short lasting quick onset inhaled form. That's why I think for some patients the routine part of their medication being a tincture or another form even of the THC combined with the CBD can be helpful, because it's not that immediate feeling, and it lasts a little bit longer. It's a little more consistent. And then using other options like inhalation for breakthrough, for panic attack, for a moment.
Yeah.
But not as your routine medication.
And even then, look to those heal pens, right? Look to some of those balanced pens that have some CBD and THC.
Yes.
I find, once again, those to be the most beneficial when you're having that instead of just a straight THC. And then, of course, the terpenes make all the difference in the world, too.
It's
you know,
true.
what
I
terpenes
think
are accompanying that THC. Because
Rhythm does a great job, a couple of the companies, but with that, and you can even tell by the color coding and the naming.
Yeah, so in our dispensary, like that teal brand from Rhythm, those are all going to be the Heal collection, or Heal. And they're all going to have CBD. I know right now we have a Pennywise disposable. It's like
Right, it's like a 1-to-1 or a 2-to-1.
2-to-1. Yeah, so it's almost 47% THC and like 27% or 25% CBD.
Oh, it's a 1-to-2. Yeah,
Yeah.
Pennywise. Yes, not Euphoria or.
That's the other way, right? That's like a 2-to-1
It's a
CBD.
2-to-1 the other way. Yeah.
And one of our most popular products right now are 2-to-1 troches the other way. 2 parts CBD, 1 part THC for the troches. That seems to be a really nice daily driver for a lot of folks, and they're getting their CBD in, they're getting a little THC, and because it's a method of eating,
Yeah.
that onset lasts much longer in duration.
That's another really interesting thing, though, because I feel like another thing that new patients come in asking for is they all just come in asking for gummies, asking for edibles, asking for gummy bears, something. They really think that that's, how they want to medicate. And even with that, with trying to go low and slow and trying to encourage patients to use CBD, I still think, and this may be more my personal opinion, but, working with Dr. Dustin Sulak in Maine, go Sulak, and some other doctors out west, I do think that being able to use a tincture to really adjust and microdose or even like a low dose tablet to really microdose at first to find where you find the sweet spot. How much do you need? 2.5 milligrams, 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams. I think a lot of the research says many patients, 10 milligrams as a routine dose, as an edible or a tincture, is probably enough for routine type of medical treatment. That's not talking about people who are treating much more extreme things, dealing with more. But being able to do that before you go to an edible that does convert in your belly to, delta hydroxy THC, it's a little bit different. It can increase anxiety for some people, cause paranoia. For me too. So
I'm not an edible. I don't really enjoy edibles for that exact reason. Is that I feel that the inhalation that hits you very much quicker. Within 10 or 15 minutes, I realized if my dose was satisfactory or not. When you eat an edible, you're going to start slow and low. Especially if you're feeling anxious, there's a lot of this. Is it working yet? Is it in yet?
Is it gonna work?
Do I feel this yet?
Right.
Do I feel enough? Is this like?
Yeah.
For me, it's not pleasant. Now, my wife, who's a patient, is the opposite. She prefers the kind of introduction of the feeling and a more sustainable feeling than inhalation, which is like, all of a sudden, like, it hit me.
Yeah.
And she's much more cannabis naive than I am. So it's just also, I think it's also experience in terms of how your body processes that THC.
It is. It's really interesting. And I think, one of the things that I've heard now from a couple of patients and a couple of different dispensaries, no offense to anyone working in those dispensaries, but just, I think accidentally, new patients have been recommended products, capsules. RSO capsules.
That patient that I talked about, that was what he was given. He was given RSO, which is something that we, like, that's like the last in our arsenal. I mean, that's...
Well, and one of the companies has a 100 milligram RSO capsule. I don't know if it's still on the market, but that's
for
a
single
lot
capsule
of RSO. Yeah.
Yeah, that's 100 milligrams is a lot of cannabis.
And so I had experience with a patient who, again, accidentally, I think they thought it was 10. Nobody expected it to be 100. But it was like a little old lady. She came in, she was like, oh dear, I didn't even know where I was,
And that's honestly, that's
that's
where the
her first
responsibility.
experience.
Like this is where we need clinical directors. This is why I advocate for the safety of medical cannabis. I also, and my mind is blown when I hear stories like this. Like that wasn't fair to that lady that she had that experience. There's nothing therapeutic about giving a little old lady a 100 milligram dose of RSO.
Right.
She's not gonna.
And
great,
no,
she
it's not
didn't
going to kill
die.
her.
Yeah, that can't be the threshold.
But she could have tripped and fallen, or she could have done something. She was smart enough just
Left
to
the
go to
stove
bed.
on, or
Right.
I mean,
she just went to bed and she had her husband there. But
which is what we advise if patients are feeling that they've had too much, is that you can sleep it off and
or have your handy dandy bottle of CBD handy and take some droppers full of CBD.
CBD, which will help.
And worst case scenario, you might poop a little, but otherwise you'll be okay. Which, if you're on opioids, that's a benefit.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll just make you go, but I'm a nurse. I can't help but talk about food.
I love when you get into your nurse mode. It's hilarious. You're like, look, these are all bodily functions that are very normal and they happen every day. And if you're not comfortable talking about it, then that's your problem, right?
You should have heard the conversation I had the other day about Valentine's Day and intimacy oil and THC and how do you make lube. And it was a whole bunch of stuff that I wasn't quite ready for. So I was
if they
just
made
like,
you
well,
blush,
you
then
can make
I'm
a
quite
suppository.
surprised. Honestly, I mean, real quick on the suppository thing, we're hearing more and more folks asking questions about that, and I cringe in some ways with all this new homemade suppository business. As a dad of 3 daughters and knows what bubble bath can do down there, like I'm really concerned about the implications of folks just willy-nilly making their own suppositories and using them vaginally. Like it doesn't seem like, I don't know.
I hear you. There is mixed research. I'm not a gynecologist, but there is mixed research about whether coconut oil is good for our vaginal pH or not. Some people use it, I know, all the time for sex, so it must work for them. Other people would say it can cause other bacteria to grow because it changes your pH. So it is complicated what you put in those places.
I'm not so much
suppositories,
and I'm not so much
definitely
against that method of administration, but to have that potential issue, and then go, I'm just going to make it at home.
Right.
That's what concerns me, as we've seen some of the edibles that these folks have tried to make, and the things that have gone wrong. And to do something like that, if nothing else, the disclaimer is you shouldn't be willy-nilly just making homemade suppositories and just using them without anything of if there's any negative repercussions.
Cleanliness and where you're storing it and how you're storing it.
But with Valentine's Day, we are featuring the O Collection on special at our dispensary, and it's very much a part of. I recently joined back the Maryland patient. One of the Maryland cannabis communities, and I was, reading, and there was a lot of women that were talking about putting the O on their tampons and utilizing that, and it seemed, at least that product comes from a clean manufacturing facility, and it seems like that would be appropriate. So I assume we're going to see more and more methods of administration as everything evolves.
I would just say there are lots of other additives in that intimacy oil. So for any woman that's going to try it, or their partner, because they're probably going to have it on them too, just maybe do a sensitivity test before you get all into it.
Try a little on the wrist.
I think it's a great product. It's a great product.
Easier to have a little, a couple bumps on the wrist.
But just to make sure you're not allergic to any of the ingredients. Yeah, I would.
Technically, they both should be
that.
patients. I mean,
And
they are sharing product.
Right. So another thing, though, for women, when you mentioned tampon, I just have to go there. So RSO on the tip of a tampon is a great way for women with really bad cramps and stuff. I've heard lots of people have good result from that. So
it's
rather than like this intimacy oil that has other things added to it and is more liquid, this just a little, and then so. Anyhow, more than you want to know, but just anyhow.
Back to kind of the idea.
Oh, so listen to this. I have a patient with prostate inflammation who's using rectal RSO because it's right there with your prostate. So for it's CBD, high CBD,
I think I've heard about this
RSO.
patient before, right? This is the patient that also does he have some mobility challenges or something where smoking or using different cannabis was the issue in the
It's the second patient.
another patient.
Yeah. So, but just interesting to think about, CBD RSO, because at first that was one of those products too, that RSO was only high THC RSO. Now we have high CBD RSO out there and available. And I think at first patients were like, why? But there are benefits. And it seems like, at least for this guy with the inflammation, it's helping.
So I feel like we're at this like point of CBD now where like the general public is starting to understand what those three letters mean, and they're seeing these gimmicky shops pop up in the gas station. And it was almost like the Maryland cannabis industry was so focused on the THC products that like it was almost letting that kind of happen outside of our spectrum. Mm-hmm. But now that the FMCC is changed some of the regulations around being able to sell those products if you have a separate store in your facility, and the folks that truly have a medical focus are realizing that there's a lack of CBD protocol in these patients, you're starting to see like the shift, right? So maybe for us, and talk about kind of if there's someone that's listening right now and maybe you're struggling with the anxiety or you're struggling with inflammation, kind of talk about what that, I'm going to give you what our new model is, and I'd love your feedback on it. So in the new wellness campus, the concept is that most folks are going to fall in one of those three areas. The majority of folks that come to us, it's either for some sort of mental health concern or hope of gain, inflammation, which often results in things like aches and pains, or some of these like silent diseases like fibromyalgia, and then sleep. All right, and so those were the three areas we want to tackle the first. So if someone comes in kind of with any of those type of qualifications, we're going to enroll them into a CBD program with both our tincture and our topical, depending on what their ailment is. And the idea is that there's new CBD programs that we do in the campus. They're going to have some sort of a consultation element involved when you first come in. So when you first come in, if you're having issues with your mental health and anxiety, you're going to sit down and we're going to talk to you about the importance of dosing consistently 4 times a day. We're going to talk to you about some breathing exercises, right? We'll talk to you about some other accompanying things that you're going to be able to do that are outside chemical that will help you make some progress with your anxiety. And then there'll be a follow-up consultation, likely a teleconsultation, following up and saying, hey, it's been 21 days or it's been 14 days. How are things going? Are you doing what you're supposed to do? What results? At that point, after 3 to 4 weeks of a CBD regimen, we should have a decent idea of where their baseline is and where we need to go. Is this something that we can probably continue with modification of your CBD regimen? Or now that we've been doing this for 30 days and we've had some level of improvement, but not where the desired outcome is, now let's enroll you in the MMCC program. You're already using either a topical or a tincture, so you're using a therapeutic product now that you're used to. So now that you get your card, maybe you're not thrilled about going into 30% flower or trying to get like...
Right, that's not your first
it's not your first, right?
Yeah.
Maybe now you're more open to saying, okay, well, the topical was really good. I'm excited to try Mary's 1-to-1 topical, right, or something that we're starting to get
tincture, whatever,
THCA, some of these other therapeutic products. And I think that the mindset is therapeutic from the beginning, non-intoxicating, minimal effective dosing. It just seems like you've conditioned that patient now for 4 or 5 weeks. You've gotten a baseline. You understand where they're at. You know way more about that patient than someone just walks in off the street into our dispensary and it says, my knee hurts.
Yeah.
Right? How does that kind of vibe with how your protocol is with patients?
It does. I think that sounds like a wonderful benefit to patients to be able to have a place to go that's not trying to get them a high or just sell them what they want, that's really trying to hold them accountable and have them follow a plan. But you have to be careful. You'll have to be careful and have disclaimers to make sure it doesn't sound like you're being prescriptive.
Yes.
That's the hard part.
It really is. For people to understand, so let's start at the highest level. So when you got your certification, it was unlikely that your doctor went into great detail in terms of you should be dosing and you need to get this exact product and you should use it 3 times a day. Even if they knew what they were talking about and they wanted to say that, that's prescribing, correct? To the best of my knowledge, that could be interpreted as a prescription, not a legal recommendation, which they're allowed to do. So the reason why they're able to give a recommendation is because if they weren't, then it would be considered a violation of their freedom of speech. So they can't limit their speech to tell them that this might be a good idea, but they can limit them from being prescriptive in their conversation. And even us, when we come into anything that we want to put in a Facebook post or we want to do a blog post.
Right, no medical claims.
Chuck Hen's here with 10 disclaimers that need to accompany it, and Mary Pat's often scrapping the whole thing because, you know.
You have to be careful. So I think that'll be the hardest part with your plan is lots of disclaimers that patients will just have to deal with and sign just to make sure that they understand that at any time they can opt out and that you're not telling them they have to do this, but that this is a nutritional supplement.
You can't even say that, right?
Like that was CBD.
It's funny though. I mean,
because it's exactly what, like, if you take it as a supplement, like
yesterday we shared we've brought on a new person for marketing. We shared a post on holistics and we used the word non-psychoactive. I had to go through it. Intoxicating, but honestly, how would she know?
Right.
Yeah.
And like, how would anyone in the public? If 100 people read that, Nurse Laura and Mary Pat are probably the only two that are like, actually, it is psychoactive.
Right,
it's non-intoxicating.
or someone whose job, right?
Or somebody whose job depend upon it.
I so often see posts and see things like that, and I think,
is that a claim? Is that a medical claim? It's like a medical
really
claim.
Yeah, yeah. They don't really know. So we do have to be careful. Just again. Number one, because we don't want to get sued. Number two, we don't want to break the law. But mostly, we don't want to cause harm. We don't want to hurt anybody.
Sure.
We don't want to mislead anybody. So I think the idea of having the follow through and having what sounds to me like an integrative medicine, integrative wellness, looking at, yes, there are some medications, whether it's a plant-based medication or your traditional medications from your doctor, along with the things that you need to do. You need to be responsible to eat the foods for your diabetes, if you have diabetes, and you need to be responsible to decrease your screen time 2 hours before bed, which nobody wants to do, or move the blue light or get the blue light. I learned now they have eyeglasses with blue light reduction in them. So like you can protect yourself from the blue light. The blue light, I guess, is what messes with your serotonin, which helps you not fall asleep.
Yeah.
So blue light comes
like
from
any
screens. So like computers and iPads and phones
any of it.
have blue light, like whatever that type of light is called blue light. And I'm not an expert in this, but I just know that it's that blue light, that time.
So there's glasses that you would wear during the day to limit your exposure?
Probably
you
at
would wear
nighttime.
them at nighttime.
Because the idea behind it is your brain doesn't have... Your body's natural ability, it goes in like a sequence, right? When it shuts down, from what I've heard.
And
right?
the melatonin in your body is like programmed to, as it gets darker and the sun's going down, to start increasing to help you to feel tired so that you would fall asleep. The screen time.
The blue lights themselves, they don't allow.
They tell your brain it's still daytime.
Still awake. So when you go to fall asleep, that's why people, I can't fall asleep for 2 hours. I'm just laying in bed. It's like because you were on your phone for an hour and your body's not acclimated.
So now you need to close that screen and give your body almost 2 hours to acclimate to get that.
Or use a blue light screen protector or blue light glass, something.
So it's funny. Like we were talking about our sleep package, right? Like one of the things that like we talked about was light deprivation. Like what's your room like? Like is there lights?
You need to be outside in the daytime in the light and inside in the dark. Lower the lights. Have an environment suitable for sleep.
All that stuff is like super fascinating to me because all of that stuff has been around since like the beginning of time, right? Because people, I mean, before we advanced as a civilization, you used to wake up when the sun came up and go to sleep when the bed. So like your body's like evolution is just ingrained to it, and we've lost so much of that. It's like so how many of the problems that we're dealing with now are just caused by these.
Right. My mom cannot fall asleep without the TV on. Like she falls asleep, she puts on
the
timer.
When I was a kid, I was like that.
She needs the TV on.
I was the same way.
Right. So I mean, so it's just.
And now I'm almost the opposite. Like now, like I really seek like a super dark, quiet environment. But honestly, when I was a kid, I couldn't fall asleep unless the TV was on.
Or the fan, or like just.
Well,
like,
we know you had other problems. Just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. But I mean, no, it's true.
CBD saved me, everybody. Even if you're rejected.
I totally get it. And I have found that with myself recently because trying to have your own business, I have to spend more time trying to post things on social media and be aware of what's out there. So I'm just making sure that I at least scroll through what all the different companies post, right? Just trying to stay well informed. What's being released? Oh, Vireo has a new product. Oh, GTI is coming out with their flower. I need to know, right? So I was finding that the only time I had was right before bed. I'd get into bed and start start scrolling, and I started having more trouble falling asleep. And
That's
I was
me.
like, duh, you
At
say
one
this
point-
to your kids. Why aren't you saying it to yourself?
Yeah, I remember a big thing for me was turning my phone off in the middle of the night. When we, back to, some of these challenges we had, before Chuck and Corpon were full time, I was on a 24-hour schedule because Chuck was working at like 4:30 in the morning to 3-ish, whatever, all day. And Corpon was a night owl. So like my phone was nonstop 24 hours a day, just in like, wake up and read something and you can't just forget it.
Right.
Like, fuck, that's an issue. Sorry. That's what I'm saying. That's an issue. and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and now what am I going to do about it? Am I going to try to go to sleep, or I try to wake up and fix
Just
it and then
do
go
it.
back to sleep?
Right.
And I realized that I had to actually just shut it down and just say, no matter what happens, I'll deal with it at 6 a.m., but I need that sleep to be able to deal with these issues in the morning. And I think a lot of us, are on these kind of constant alert, and your body's constantly getting dings and messages. And
Well, and if you have like one of the watches, I mean, really, you can just, I see people, they're like, no, I don't have my phone. I'm like, yeah, but you have your Apple Watch. Like, it's the same idea.
And to your point, like, these things haven't been around very long. Like,
The new technology hasn't, but the philosophy.
no. These new things that allow, like, computer screens, like they weren't around 100 years ago. Like,
Right.
These are new things that we're
Technologies.
introducing to our body, and a lot of, I think, the answers are going to be looking at what we used to do before these things were introduced.
I think you're going to be like, okay, there was this point where like matured or whatever, and like there's a natural progression that your body undertakes every day or whatever, and now we're great. We have all this technology, which is super awesome, right? There's got to be like that balance between the two of them, I think. And I
Right.
think that's, hopefully that's where all this is going.
And is that one of your segments? So you have feel well, feel.
So be well, which
Be
is
well.
mental. Feel well is kind of body, focused around aches, pains, and recovery. So for the older folks, really reducing inflammation and getting them more agile and mobile. For sports medicine-minded folks, we really want to get back into the recovery side of things. So how can folks get their recovery off their workouts and things like that much faster and more appropriate? I'm getting ready to get a Whoop band. Have you heard of them? They tracks your sleep and recovery. So we're excited to start playing with some of these different things. But the idea is we have an MMA fighter who's starting to use, as a coach and a fighter, a younger fighter and a coach, are starting to use our products in their gym for recovery tools. So it's that part's exciting, and then the last is sleep well, which I would assume out of the segment, the sleep well would probably have the highest conversion, probably to the MMCC program. It seems like CBD does a great job for a lot of folks, but THC is just a killer for sleep. Those folks that are really struggling.
It's true. I think I've shared with you before that I myself, and I've seen some patients now that taking CBD only at bedtime may and did for me help me feel relaxed and fall asleep. But I was having more vivid dreams such that I was waking up feeling less rested. I was sleeping and it wasn't nightmares. They were good dreams, but I just woke up feeling less rested.
You weren't in that REM sleep state.
Something about the sleep cycle, CBD, and I checked with Dustin Sulak, and he verified that there definitely is something about your sleep cycle in CBD. And so all I did, and I have encouraged patients now, is just move the CBD up to dinner time, so that you still have that relaxation, you still have the second dose of the day, but just not right at bedtime. And then really, for people with trouble sleeping, THC really is it's just good for sleep. And again, or CBN or some other, it doesn't have to be. Really, smoking isn't the greatest idea for bedtime because it doesn't last very long. It all depends on why you're not sleeping.
Yeah, you're not sleeping because it's that initial falling asleep, but once you get asleep, you're good.
Then smoking is great,
right?
Short term,
but if you tell me
minimal
that
amount.
you're up all night,
Right.
then I'm absolutely going to look at an edible. It's going to have an 8-hour onset time and say, and product specific. I tried last week, bedtime Eddies. It's a 20 milligram lemon flavored edible with some CBN, some melatonin in it. I don't know maybe it doesn't have CBN. Maybe it's just CBD and melatonin and THC. But I slept like a champ. It was really good. And a lot of those things also I find particularly are good for sporadic use. So if I would use that every single night, just like everything else, your body starts metabolizing it differently, and your body builds up a tolerance. But if you save those things for, okay, I'm going to use CBD as my daily regimen, and then if I have something going on, it's a little harder, I'll bump the THC up. Sometimes it's about keeping your tolerance low, so that when you introduce those things, you get the desired result that you're looking for, as opposed to just blowing your tolerance out because you just take it every single day, whether you need it or not. I think THC is one of those things that's very easy to build your tolerance up, which is great for patients that need THC, that are naive and haven't used it before, because you can set expectations that, after 7 to 14 days, your body's going to adjust to this fairly quickly. You're not going to have this crazy high feeling from 2.5 or 5 milligrams that maybe you have the first time.
Right.
But also, we find that patients that overdo it, they come to us and say, it's taking me twice as much to get the same desired effect. So because your tolerance is building up, because you're overdoing it.
Take a little tolerance break, and you'll be right back down, hopefully.
Yeah.
And the tolerance breaks don't necessarily even have to be very long. I mean, I guess it all depends on how much is in your system, but I know for me, like a 24-hour or like anything longer than that, just almost like a reset completely. But I'm not a super heavy user. So
I am a pretty heavy user, but I find about the same. It doesn't take very long for me at all. And even like last Monday, I had like a really good work. I played lacrosse, so I was like just sweat like more than I'd done in forever, and I felt like I got a lot of that stuff out. And I didn't use cannabis after that night, and I didn't use cannabis that morning, which I typically would have. And that afternoon, when I used it for the first time, I used kind of my standard dose, and I got rocked. Like I literally did. I was like, wow, I was amazed at how quick my tolerance.
You had done like a little body cleanse.
Yeah, I really did. And that's like my favorite thing. One of my favorite things about cannabis is
Hopefully you're drinking lots of water too.
I am.
Okay.
And lemon water in the morning, and I'm doing this intermittent fasting thing. So I'm drinking a lot of water, actually, because it's the only thing that I can have.
You're allowed to have broth, right, or something.
I don't know. I don't mind it. It actually hasn't been that bad for me, because I'm not a big morning eater. The only difference I've had to make is capping at 8 o'clock at night, making sure I'm not doing late night eating. And all that late night eating was all junk and not good stuff anyway. So it's been really effective
it's interesting,
for me.
Right? Because just back to what you were saying, right, about what used to happen, right? They used to hunt and eat and gather
That's
and
what I
cook
thought
in
about.
the daytime.
You woke up in the morning, you didn't have anything.
Right.
You had to go out and go get your food for the day.
Yeah.
Like, so you probably, best
And you
case
didn't eat
scenario,
late at
you had
night.
something by noon.
Right, you didn't
And
have a
I mean,
microwave.
if you think about the culture that we live in, I know you brought about it, just like the culture of abundance, right? Where no matter where you are, you drive down the street in America and you can stuff your mouth from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed.
Right.
And most of it, 95% of it is
Crap.
just shit. So if you're like just conscious about the amount that you like, you're just conscious about the food that you put in your body, and you treat it like a nutritional supplement or anything like you should. Like, it just makes such a ton of difference. Like when I started the intermittent fasting thing, I was horrible at nighttime too. Like, and sometimes in the morning I get up super early and it's 6 o'clock and I'm like huffing down food. But now if I wait and your body gets a chance to just breathe and relax, and you still like my
And when I
energy
do
levels
eat,
are bigger,
I'm
it's
hungry.
crazy.
So it's easier for me to eat healthier foods because I'm not so picky about what I eat, because I'm hungry. I want to eat, right? So it's
You're still not completely selling me. So I'm not a diet person. I don't like trends. I don't like fads.
I wouldn't call this a diet. I think the best way to describe it might be like, some people call it intermittent fasting or time restricted eating. So
Restricted is the word I don't like.
See, for me, it's a lifestyle thing. Like, it's just because I'm not limiting the type of food that I eat, and which is really challenging for me to like manage my macros and things like that with my schedule. But if I just know that like you're not going to eat late at night, and you typically don't eat breakfast, and when you do, there's not a lot of healthy offerings for breakfast that I like to eat anyway.
Right. See, that it's the breakfast that gets me just a little bit. Not that it has to be super early, but I think about, if you're going to a big important meeting or you're going to crunch some numbers, a little bit of protein in your belly for your brain to have energy.
And I think so. Like, my trainer is like thinks this is great for me and my lifestyle, but her first client's at 5 a.m. So she has to eat in the morning. Like, she could never go that way. And one thing that I've learned about diet is there's no way it's a one size fits all, right? Like,
just like cannabis.
Just like cannabis.
It's probably just like everything else healthcare related, which is why we're getting more and more of these DNA tests, and we're trying to figure out,
for me, for my body, for my lifestyle.
Yeah, exactly. This, was like customized kind of medicine, and that's great.
Concierge cannabis nursing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that it's for everybody, but for me, And I think one of the reasons why I don't feel like it's a diet because it hasn't been hard for me to adjust.
Well, like you said, your
meets my
problem was you were
lifestyle.
eating late at night.
Yeah.
And you never were a big breakfast eater
Right, yeah,
anyhow. So it sounds like
this fits me.
and it's working.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and you look great. I mean, really, since the last time I saw you till this time, which I think was October-ish, maybe I can't remember when I was here, but
Yeah.
You look healthy.
Thank you.
So
No, I
that's
think,
good.
and these are things like, and these are conversations that now when we bring the wellness brand, like these are the conversations we want to have. It's like we know we're not going to tell somebody, oh, you're a vegetarian, cut that meat out. No, you're on the carnivore diet, you eat keto, you eat this, that. It's like, no, let's find some common ground and have a conversation about some of these things.
Does your diet logically make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Like I don't want to hear about your Dunkin' Donut diet.
Yeah.
Like,
Or at least to turn people on to with the internet and technology these days. I think people just don't understand how much stuff's really out there. If you were to able to open their eyes a little bit and just show them different avenues to go down, like
Some quality
to experiment,
resources.
quality resources, like right.
But it's so
experiment on
funny
themselves.
because you just mentioned vegetarian, so I'm thinking like you could generally tell. You would think you could say to almost every person, you need to eat more vegetables. Except for to someone who's using Coumadin, right? Or on a medication that they can't have too many dark green leafy vegetables because you tell them to eat more dark green leafy vegetables. So you say vegetables, they don't know the difference, and then they bleed, right? Or they clot. So it's so interesting.
Cannabis safer than broccoli.
Right. It's really interesting that it really is so much not one size fits all.
My mindset, right, and actually I got it from Brandon, but we were talking about like fuel sources. So like my three fuel sources are obviously food, cannabinoids, and coffee and caffeine. And like managing when I take them and when I utilize them is what I've been playing with most recently to try to figure out, because I'm constantly looking for more energy and like I'm kind of, I'm looking to do it internally. I'm not looking to take anything else. I'm looking at how do I use those three things better, more effectively to give myself the maximum amount of energy and get the most production out of my day. And it's been a cool journey. And like Chuck said, like, it's been a relief to really be able to open up everything and look at wellness as a holistic, broad-reaching. Are you taking yoga? What are you doing for sleep? What's your nutrition
stress
like?
relief, exercise.
You breathe through your mouth all day long, because if you do that, that might be one of the worst things ever for you. It's like crazy to think about all these things.
Yeah, I'm gonna get my nose broke this year. I mean, they don't even break it any longer. Now they just stick a balloon in there.
Really?
Yeah, I've had a deviated septum for a long time, and it's like it's always bothered me. And the more I read about how it can affect sleep apnea and what that does to your heart and all these different things, it's super important. And like, it's going from something that was just an annoyance to now I look back and like teeth, like it affects everything.
It affects your teeth. It affects like how much gas you have burping, like farting. Your wife might be happier.
Yeah, I shouldn't snore. I definitely snore when I sleep.
I don't know what goes on in your home, but
just the idea is I think it makes sense to start looking kind of at everything.
Yeah.
And realizing that it could be something simple as mismanagement of caffeine, why you can't sleep at night. Like,
well, and it sounds like you're going to be a testament to the brand, which is really wonderful to hear. You're not just saying this is for other people. This is how I'm going to make money.
I don't think that's a good look. Like, look at me be fat, overweight, and stressed out, and my beautiful wellness campus over there. Like,
right. No, but it's really important. I think that happens often. How many nurses and doctors? I know this from being in healthcare, right? How many nurses and doctors? How many firefighters look like they can't run to
How
get
many
to the
police
fire?
officers couldn't run to catch a suspect? Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
That's
Which every service person, I love you, and we're happy to have you, but we need to take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
Like you learn the basics of first aid and like basic life support, CPR.
You take care of yourself first, right?
Take care of yourself. Is the scene safe? Don't go help the person in the middle of the street if there's another bus coming right behind them. Right? Make sure that the scene is safe. On an airplane, they tell the parents, right? When the masks come down, put your mask on first before you put it on your child. So here you are saying, I need to start taking a look at me. I'm taking accountability for me.
I'm gonna say I'm a typical American, but the things that the stress and the anxiety and the inflammation that I face is not uncommon. That's what the more we have these conversations, the more it's okay for a 37-year-old dude to be able to openly speak about anxiety and feeling anxious and how that affects their ability to be a spouse and a husband, a business owner. It's a new world, and I'm excited and glad that we're getting away from all these folks that are just closetly killing themselves and closetly using opiates and closetly doing all these things that are detrimental to not just their own personal health, but our society in general. I mean, it's a societal problem that we're addressing in our wellness campus. And it's something I get really excited about because I know people around me that haven't made it out, right? I mean, it's uncommon for me to go a month without someone from my high school within 4 years posting that so-and-so died.
Wow.
I mean, I graduated in 2000. Oxy came out in 98.
Mostly opioid epidemic.
Solid.
Right? Heroin. Wow.
I mean, I watched kids snort heroin, and by the time I graduated high school, like heroin was in Pasadena, Maryland, which is a predominantly white suburb of Annapolis, Baltimore. And then, by the time we were in college, you could see it spreading. And by the time we were out of college, it was an epidemic, and now it's this, this big, crazy, well talked about thing. But we saw it. I mean, I saw it firsthand happening. It started with people stealing their parents' pills or their grandmother's pills or dogs' pills.
Right. Well, and what I think is really sad is I think once people get wrapped up in it, they don't see any way out. Right. So some people now in some states, I know Maryland's not there yet, have taken the medical cannabis program to also for opioid, for opiate addiction and opiate
as an
withdrawal,
included condition. As
an included condition. I have experience with a couple of patients recently, a couple of younger, like in the early 20s, late, 19, that were using drugs, using marijuana illegally, and going down a path that looked pretty scary. And thankfully for one of them, the mom knew me and she just reached out to me and she's like, aren't you doing that weed stuff? Because I think my son is doing something. Like, if he'll talk to you, can you talk to him? So long story short, I mean, he ended up going to the hospital, suicidal. Came back around. We started on CBD, Peninsula Holistic CBD, because that's the greatest thing, and that's with your wellness campus. People who aren't ready or are afraid because of all the barriers of work and laws and all the things you mentioned earlier can get something, can try something to know there's some help, some relief, and then potentially go for the medical card and have that as an option. Well, this kid, by the time he used the CBD oil for 2 months, started feeling better, got his card, shopped one time, and then I never heard from him again. And I thought, well, that's kind of odd. I hope, I didn't think it was a money problem. So I reached out and he said, oh yeah, I don't use any of that anymore. I'm good. I'm just good. I'm better. It was like he had an out. He had an option. We opened the lines of communication about his addiction. It became, let's treat the disease, not you're bad for having an addiction. Yeah. Once the conversation was open, he actually got help, then a little relief, and then he didn't need it anymore.
Which is
that's a best case scenario. But I think that's so important for the closet users of anything, just to be able to talk about it, even if it's eating, like binge eating, right? Yeah. If you can talk about it, if you can, like I have an ice cream thing. If there's ice cream in the freezer,
it's gone. I'm
eating it, and I'm usually eating it by myself, right? So what I have found now is like I call and confess to one of my friends. I'm like, there's ice cream. I'm only having a scoop, But it's like just to be able to know someone else knows.
Yeah.
Even though that's.
We
could be offensive to some people.
And like,
right?
Yeah, we talk. Yeah, like just be able to have the confidence in somebody, just to be able to express how you feel and get it out of you.
Right, and I hope if there are parents listening, really, parents, this is so important, because for kids to be able to talk about this with their parents, if they really are using even like smoking joints before school and they really think they need it, if they could talk to their parents about it, and parents could be understanding and try to at least open the lines of communication, they can guarantee at least that they're getting a safe product.
Yeah, I mean, I think
not
that's...
laced product.
Yeah. Which is a big, like as a parent, that's like the one thing I would fear about the most, right? Is my kids just wanting to try something like we all did, and now everything's laced with fentanyl or something else. It's just like one time of a dumb decision that every single teenager in America makes at least once, right?
Right. Like and again, I'm not encouraging that we have kids just using medical cannabis for fun at all. I'm not a fan of kids doing drugs, but if they're doing it,
it's a different conversation now in 2020, and I think parents need to know that they have options other than just say no, because sometimes just saying no doesn't address your child's anxiety and doesn't address your child's depression, and those underlying factors may lead that child to something far more dangerous than cannabis, or something very dangerous in that child's pursuit of cannabis, which, to your point, something laced, something
Right.
that's I get scared of people taking hemp and throwing something on it to cause an intoxicating effect and selling it in the street because it looks like cannabis. It would be a very economical way for someone to put something out there.
Yeah.
So I had a girl that I went to high school with reached out to me. They caught their child using cannabis, and the question was, well, what do I do if I were you? And I said, well, honestly, I would try to understand the underlying conditions. I would offer them CBD to begin with. I don't think you don't give your child a carte blanche to just smoke weed whenever they want. That child is 17. They're still a child. They need guidance and they need support. But I wouldn't necessarily freak out on them and just take it away without providing something else, whether that's therapy, whether it doesn't have to be a substance, but there's got to be something to fill that void. And I think, that's where like the Dave Chappelle in a very rigid and rough way addresses the opioid epidemic in his latest stand-up is like, I thought you guys were supposed to just say no, right? And like that's not a viable excuse anymore. We need to be treating folks that have chemical dependency issues, and that's like, it's even the word addiction is weird to me. Like, are they addicted or are they just dependent upon that chemical in their current environment?
Right.
Because we see a lot of times that you change that environment and you give them coping mechanisms. Like the thing that we can go on a diatribe here, but when I look at addiction, oftentimes the scientific study with like where they took rats and they put one water bottle in the corner and then in the other water bottle is cocaine water, right? Have you heard this? I mean, this is like one of the most like fundamental psychological studies, and what they find is that the rats immediately will go over and start drinking the cocaine water, and then they become dependent upon that, and that's what they want. There was another psychological study called Rat Park, where they took these rats and they built them like
A playground?
a playground, and they had other rats to hang out with. And they have two water bottles, cocaine water, regular water. Well, the rats in the happy environment, when they weren't just stuck by themselves in a box with two options, a substance or not, they choose the regular water. Right. And the idea is that addiction and dependency of chemicals is not so much a physical chemical addiction, but so much more a lack of connection to either your environment or to other people. And if you address that connection issue and allow them to feel connected and feel valid and feel worthy, a lot of times they don't have that same desires to go. It's not necessarily the heroin all the time. It's the fact that they were abused and they have this trauma that
When
led
they got
them,
started,
that
I
got
want to
them-
addiction, many drugs, many things are truly physically addicting. But yes, that the initial, that what caused them to
got
reach
them to
out
get
to
into that.
start to become addicted
Yeah.
is usually not just, ooh, let me
if
try
you stop
this.
alcohol and you're physically addicted, you'll die. Potentially,
There
you could die
definitely are.
if you.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't want to discredit the physical addiction to that, but I do believe that a lot of addictions begin at a longing for a connection of something else.
Or coping because of
coping
trying
mechanism.
to hide from, and it's interesting because our culture, I think, for the most part now, does think of alcoholism as a disease, but I still think addiction to drugs is a stigma. It's not a disease, right? It would be neat if we could get to the point where we
changing,
look at
right? I think, like,
drug addiction also as a disease that you need support and therapy and coping.
I think we're starting to get there, at least in my comic account. We have a Go Purple campaign to raise awareness around opioid addiction and the fact that it doesn't hit one socioeconomic demographic, that it's widespread. And I think we get to the point now where, like, I'm in a conversation with some folks in Salisbury, and a very high-ranking official, his son was through the rehab programs, right? And like, it's no longer like this embarrassment, but it's more like I've experienced what other parents and other folks have experienced.
You can relate.
I feel like it's so much harder to stand behind a cloak of well, the opioid epidemic hasn't affected me or my family. Like,
Yeah.
really? Like, I bet it has.
It's like
You
saying
probably-
cancer hasn't affected me and
Yeah,
my family.
exactly.
I mean, it affects
It's-
everyone in some way.
in some way,
Maybe
shape, or
a
form.
few
Maybe
less.
maybe it's not your brother or sister, but your brother or sister's friend or
Right.
cousin or nephew or someone that you know has battled with this because it's so predominant. So,
Yeah.
all right. So if someone wants to find you and talk to you about CBD, give them some of the best ways to contact you and.
Great. Yes. So rnforwellness.com, www.rnforwellness.com is one way. There's a contact us that gets right to me. RN for Wellness on Facebook also. And then I think I'm
You have any events scheduled?
Laura BRN or something on Instagram, but you'll find me somehow, Laura Barrett Nutting. I do have a couple of events coming up. This Saturday, I'm in Odenton.
Anne Arundel County represent.
Yeah, a Better You Medical Spa. Dr. Clark Bennett and I are doing an education and patient sign-up event. And tomorrow I'm doing a dispensary tour for nurses that are a part of this American Cannabis Nurses Association.
Awesome. Where at?
Howard County-ish. We're going to go to a couple
Oh,
dispensaries.
you're doing a couple.
Uh-huh.
So a tour of like a couple dispensaries.
I'm taking the nurses, going to just try to talk to them about ways. From my understanding, there are many people, nurses and other clinicians that would like to be involved with medical cannabis, but they just don't know how to break into it. And how do you start the conversation? And because it's not required today. So I'm hoping to be able to encourage my peer nurses and hopefully actually to build a team of nurses, right? So that I can know that they have the same kind of mission and values that I have. They're working with dispensaries that truly want to educate and help their patients on that medical front. So I'm hoping that this is a little stepping stone to share some of that education. So we're doing that tomorrow in Howard County, then next month in like Frederick County, and maybe we'll come to the Eastern Shore.
That would be
maybe
awesome.
The month after.
I think that's phenomenal. And
It's a little warmer outside, right?
Yeah, when it's warmer and we can like spend the night at the beach.
I'm not just saying this because you are a nurse, but when I understand how important nurses are to the healthcare industry as a general and how valuable they are as oftentimes the front line dealing with the patients and getting understanding. And there's such a lack of education and resources for them. I went in for a kidney stone on Christmas Day, and first off, I was offered fentanyl as my first option, which I quickly declined. And she said, "What are you going to use for the pain?" I said, "I'm going to take another gummy with these medical cannabis." She goes, "Oh, you don't smell like weed." So, well, thank you. But that's pretty fucking offensive. Like, if I wanted to get, butthurt about it, like, what am I supposed to smell like? Like Cheech and Chong? Like, there's people that are using medicine. Like, do you say if I told you that, like, I take an ibuprofen, you don't look like, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's just weird.
You eat asparagus, your pee smells.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's still a huge gap. Sometimes I feel like, we're trucking along. We are, but there's still a gap in the general medical population. And every day, we're working on the shore to help educate. And so I applaud the fact that you're doing this. I think it's amazing. And the more that folks like you and I and Dr. Hoffman open the medical community's eyes to what can really happen in a great environment, and it doesn't have to be this countercultural Cheech and Chong's head shop where everyone's getting RSO every day.
Yeah. Oh, two more events too. I just want to make sure to mention this. You're mentioning nurses and education. So I'm working with Jackie Cohen-Roth, right?
Yes.
Cannabis MD, and Fleecy Hubbard. We're putting on an event called the Cannabis MD Provider Forum. So it's a CME credit, so actually continuing education credit for medical providers on May 2nd. So you can find that. I'll have it on my website.
Where's that at?
But it's in Baltimore County.
Perfect.
And so we'll be able to get providers some continuing education credits and have some panels and some good information for them about the Maryland program and like the surrounding areas. And then Hopkins, any women, this is a women's group, particularly the Women of Hopkins Leadership Program. I'm helping to put that together, which is in March, and I'm going to be on a panel for entrepreneurs.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really
That's really great. And are you going to be there on the 27th? Are you coming to T-Pad?
Yes.
Okay. We are sponsoring, along with Jackie, T-Pad, the first T-Pad on the Eastern Shore. It's going to be in Cambridge. Our good friend Daryl Hill is coming to be the keynote speaker. A really amazing story. If you haven't heard Daryl Hill's story, not just the first African-American football player at Maryland, but the first African-American football player in the ACC.
Wow.
And just a really cool story of overcoming adversity and just different times. So, shout out to Daryl Hill, our friendly competitor in good city of Cambridge. We're looking really forward to that event. So, that's on the 27th. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Chuck, anything?
I think I'm good. That was a good conversation.
All things CBD, so important. If you have questions, you're on the Western Shore, reach out to Nurse Laura. If you're a provider looking to carry a high-quality CBD product, she can definitely help you out with getting a Peninsula Holistics wholesale account. Thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you.